Namaskar and a very good morning to all of you. We have gathered here today to discuss the other T word. And I may want you to reflect on the connection between the first T and the second T. But we also are gathered in a very changed landscape from what it was just a year ago. So I thought it might be useful to, as we begin the open proceedings of this 9th GTS, in a way to share with you an Indian view of the geotech landscape. How do we see the world? Why, in my view, Sambhavna, possibilities, is an appropriate theme for this year. And it is natural that when we speak about change and the T word, that we begin with the United States. Now, all that I can say, and I'm sure nobody would really disagree with this, is that the US has fundamentally changed its approach to engaging the world. And it has consequences across every domain. But the tech consequences, I believe, would be particularly profound. And it'll be profound not just because the US is the largest economy, the main driver in a way of global tech advancements, but also because it's very clear that tech has a big role in making America great again. So there is a connection between MAGA and tech, which perhaps was not so clear between 2016 and 2020. In our business, one milestone, one example of the profound changes in American policy has been Vice President Vance's speech to the Munich Security Conference. There was actually, to my mind, a very impactful speech before that as well, which perhaps didn't get the same degree of attention, which was to the AI Action Summit in Paris, which was just a few days before Munich. So the changes in the United States, which all of you are as familiar, if not more than me, I think is one big shift in the last year. But there's the other shift, and that's an evolution, you can say. It's something which appears, even if it is not, more more of an unfolding rather than dramatic events, and that is the advancement of China. So that has happened in respect, of course, on trade. What we saw in many ways as the trade story has also been the tech story. And it's had its dramatic moments. DeepSeek was one. But I would argue that the changes impelled by China are as consequential as the shifts in the American position. In fact, one is to some extent influenced by the other. If one were to turn our attention to Europe, I think again here the change in the last year has been very sharp. 5 years ago, I think Europe probably had the best geopolitical situation. It had worked out the ideal triangulation between the United States, Russia, and China. Today, every side of that triangle is under stress. So from, and perhaps there's a lesson in it, sometimes very intricate hedging from the best of all worlds, you can end up as the most difficult of all worlds. But again, I want to stress here that there are very important tech aspects to Europe's predicament, and in fact to our own interaction with Europe. And this year, just a month ago, we had 21 European commissioners visiting us. I think if you correlate the sort of intensity today of India-EU relations, there is, I think, clearly sort of factoring in both of their predicament as well as of the way India looks at possibilities which have opened up after that. A word about East Asia as well. I think in many ways, Japan particularly, South Korea to some extent, have also sought through the tech world means of a geopolitical comeback. And the salience of Taiwan, of course, doesn't need to be even mentioned. Now, in all of this, where is India? And you had an opportunity in this visit. I hope your conversations in the last 2 days have enhanced it, and the coming 2 days even more so, to acquaint yourself and to debate and discuss what is happening in our part of the world. Some of it is better known, DPI, for example. Some of it is in the making. I mean, the priority now given after many decades to semiconductors is an example. I think the space advancements are very interesting, not just for what they have achieved, but the manner in which the space industry and the space ecosystem itself is changing. I would say that to some degree for drones as well. The startup culture is deepening. The number of GCCs in this country is growing. And of course, when it comes to the AI era, I think where India is concerned, it's not just the scale of the data which would be generated, but in many ways the diversity of the data which would make it somewhat unique. So that's the way I would say geographically the landscape looks. A few words about some issues dealing with the current tech policy challenges we look at. Again, I think we are stating the obvious today when we say that tech has made trade much more national security sensitive. So we had almost an autonomous discussion about reliable and resilient supply chains, and one about trusted and transparent digital existence. And I think today the two have really fused together, and that fusion will become deeper. And it will make the traditional model of partnerships much more difficult to take forward. So the orthodox ideas that we hedge on everybody and get the best out of everything is not going to be that easy. It's a point I made last year as well, and I think events have only shown that there's a even greater complexity on that. The other point I would make is the revival of interest, certainly, hopefully of industry as well, on the nuclear side. And the connection, again, which all of you are familiar, between the AI growth and the interest in nuclear energy. Talent, the availability and flow of talent, I think in many ways will be the Achilles heel for industries in many countries. And certainly for us in the foreign policy side, that has acquired today much greater salience. Many of our discussions with international partners today revolve around, the smooth flow of talent, just as they do about making GCCs easier to function in this country. Natural resources is the other increasingly important factor. I think many choices and priorities are going to be made in terms of natural resources directly relevant to this age and time. So, I would just end with that note, that adage about data being the new oil. I think today we are grappling with who are the consumers, what will be the mode of consumption, where are the refineries for that new oil, and finally, what is going to be the trade in that particular commodity. And I'm really pleased that the organizers of GTS have chosen to take an optimistic view of this churn which is underway. This was completely their decision, but I do want to say that it reflects in many ways the mood of the country and certainly the outlook of the government. So with those words, Rudra, I think perhaps we could go in for the conversation. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much for setting the context and beyond. Perhaps I could just start with the two T's. In this world of two T's, in between the T's and beyond the T's, and given the theme of the summit, what do you see as the opportunity for India? You've often argued that in times of disruption, there is opportunity. So where's the opportunity for India today?
In which T?
In either, let's start with tech. We'll come to the other one.
I think there are opportunities conceptually of different kinds. One that we are actually seeing leapfrogging possibilities. I mean, if we are going to follow a path which was linear and extrapolative in a way, I think that has its own limitations with which we would have always struggled, because we would have come at it perhaps not with the required efficiency to get the benefits of it. So when you have now new pathways, some of which are still not invented, I think there are great possibilities here in terms of growth of new sectors, of really creating value, and also the other part of it is bringing our strengths to bear, because at the end of the day, if a world is much more talent-centric and much more data-centric, I think that clearly is something which holds sambhavna for India. Now, again, it's not a given, because often when we get into these discussions, it's like, that's a slam dunk. That's surely going to happen. Nothing in life is surely going to happen. I mean, these are options. We will have to still have the right policies. In many ways, make up for deficiencies of the past, and try to really address it. In terms of the other T, to my view, to my mind, what it has done is it has focused our own minds on the need for actually correcting what I would call a certain skewed nature of our openness to the global economy. Many of us have argued for a long time that our more complementary partners are actually in the West. I mean, these are areas, these are economies where real growth is possible. These are much more open, they are market economies, there's a certain contractual underpinning to everything you do. These are truly, not entirely, but much more competitive certainly than the economies to the east of us. So I would argue that, we have today an opportunity to actually take the current situation, and if we can focus on these three big negotiations we have underway with the United States, with the EU and with UK, I would say we could, if these really work out for us, let us say some in this year, we would be in a very different position. And I would again make the point, all three have a very high tech content.
So just on that high-tech content, and this is some of the discussions we've been having over the last 2 days, and outside of the, let's call it the bigger T for the moment, India has created new policy architectures. There's the TTC process. There used to be the ISET. Now there's a brand new approach, trust through the Quad, etc. Over the last couple of years, if I can just ask you general reflections, how are these tech partnerships actually working out for India, which seems to be genuinely moving us in a multipolar way, but what's your reality check on the partnerships?
My reality check on the partnerships would be that you have to move both the regulatory system and the real economy in step with each other. That often we would have discussions, but if they're not followed through by actual projects, those discussions then don't have the seriousness that the other party would have given it. So for me, it's not just a question of do you have an ISET or do you have a trust or do you have a TTC. It's also what is actually, are we seeing projects in India or collaborative efforts which match those discussions. I think that's been happening to a greater degree in the last few years. A lot of room for improvement. Much more that we expect in each of these areas. I mean, when we look in terms of the sunrise sectors, but we need them both. We again, unless we have, because the reality of export controls is back. Not just back, actually it's back with a bang. So if you don't have those conversations, but you don't have also that energy from the industry, you need them to feed on each other.
I just want to come to the US for a second. And the last couple of days, there's been intense discussions about how do you put substance into trust, whether it's on AI, biopharma, nuclear, defense, and a range of other issues. But I think almost every big tech company and their captains sitting here and otherwise have brought to the fore the point that is there a risk in investing too much in trust given that the other T hovers? So can trust be trusted?
Look, I think it can, because even where the other T is concerned, do recall that, I mean, within a month of the change in administration, we actually have conceptually an agreement that we will do a bilateral trade agreement, that we will find a fix which will work for both of us, because we have our concerns too. And it's not an open-ended process, because that's often the frustration of trade negotiations. We did 4 years of talking in the first Trump administration. They have their view of us, and frankly, we have our view of them. The bottom line is that a deal didn't get done. So if you look at the EU, I mean, often people say we've been negotiating for 23 years, which is not entirely true, because we had big blocks of time when nobody was even talking to somebody else. But they have tended to be very protracted processes. This time around, we are certainly geared up for a very high degree of, I would say, urgency. I mean, we see a window here. We want to seize that window. So our trade teams are ready. They're really charged up, and we have really, when I look at the trade teams, I mean, it's not my direct remit, but we have a lot to do with each other. I mean, these are people very much on top of the game, very I would say, ambitious about what they want to achieve. So we are trying to, in each case, to get the other side to kind of speed it up. Now, this is normally a complaint in the past which used to be made about us, that we were the guys slowing it down. So it's actually today the other way around. And I think that urgency we are trying to really communicate on all three accounts. My sense is probably in terms of the other parties' response, at least so far, the US has been fairly quick to respond to whatever has been tabled. But, we'll now have to see after April 2nd how that picks up.
The other question that keeps coming up is that India has done an incredible amount in the policy architecture in the last 2 to 3 years to really jettison the new critical and emerging ecosystem. We have a semiconductor mission, we have a national AI mission, we have a big summit that the Prime Minister will be chairing early next year perhaps. There is a push on quantum, on critical minerals. Each of these have a national mission. The question is there a contradiction that you see between MAGA and Atmanirbharta, what some now have started calling MEGA?
No, I don't see a contradiction because anybody who's been objective about the direction of the world would have seen the trend lines. This didn't come out of the blue. Okay? I mean, if you see the reactions in different societies to what was the state of the world. I mean, in UK, for example, it was expressed as Brexit almost a decade ago. In different developed economies, you can see it in terms of frustration with their quality of life, with their job opportunities. I mean, there are different aspects to it. There's a whole, there was a very different debate which was building under this complacency about globalization, which was the frustration about what it was doing to manufacturing. I mean, in this country, for example, I can tell you politically, there's very deep, sort of, I would say almost anger about the kind of dumping which has taken place and the impact which it has had on small and medium enterprises. And that was part of the reason why we were very cautious about joining RCEP. So the fact is, these trends were in the making. Some of us chose to not see it because of our own beliefs or our own interest or our own habits. So it hasn't come upon us suddenly, and the fact is, we now have to find ways of balancing it out. And I would argue that being in it for ourselves is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think countries will find some equilibrium and will find partnerships and relationships rather than be, I would say, be pressurized by political correctness, saying, how can you not join that grouping? Because everybody else is joining the grouping. We've had arguments in this country that we should join something not because it's good for us, but because everybody else is doing it. So I think we need to have the courage and the honesty to say, yes, we are in it for ourselves. I will make that evaluation. I'll do that cost benefit. And even if it is going against the trend of the world, I will do what I feel is in my interest. And I think we are, when you take that kind of approach to global negotiations, it's possible to find meeting points. So I don't see that as necessarily a negative.
As we move to the AI summit, and I believe now the summit is going to be called the Impact Summit, which seems opportune. You mentioned the need for AI data centers, and then comes the question of energy. India, the government has now set out a very clear target, 100 gigawatts by Viksit Bharat, 2047. For that to happen, we'll possibly require a constitutional amendment and changes to other rules and regulations.
Not constitutional amendment. You need amendment of the law.
Amendment of the law, correct. Do you see that happening anytime soon?
Well, I think it's the declared position of the government that we need to relook at the liability law because clearly the current law has not instilled confidence in the international nuclear industry for nuclear projects to take place in this country. I mean, that's a fact of life. We've tried various options in the hope that somehow we could bridge that gap. And I think we've come to the conclusion that maybe now the liability law needs to be amended in a way in which, because at the end of the day, what's the good of having a great initiative if it doesn't actually deliver results on the ground. And so what started off in 2005 as the opening of our pathway, if it has not produced the kind of outcomes which were envisaged 20 years ago, I think we should have the honesty to ask ourselves, okay, what is it which needs to be done differently? And I would say this government has the courage to ask that question. The second issue, which is autonomous of that, is when you look generally at the global nuclear industry, I would say in most cases there is a role for the private sector, and the state has certain designated responsibilities. I mean, it's a regulator, it's a licensor, deals with the safety, security, I mean, the safeguards, whatever it is. But I think there is a question we need to ask ourselves whether we should not be opening it up to the private sector. And I can tell you just anecdotally that at least there seems to already have evoked a strong expression of interest from the private sector. So there are two independent issues, but I think on both the government has taken a view that it's prepared to look at it and move forward.
Let me ask you a deep question about a deep issue. There are a lot of developers in this room from different parts of the world, but also in India. And many of those from India have started fine-tuning various solutions on top of DeepSeek. And the question they keep asking is that, look, it's ostensibly open source. We can fine-tune it. We can use it for various applications. But obviously, there is a concern that if the government of India takes a different view on one of our neighbors, it might put us in a bit of jeopardy. India banned TikTok back in 2020. Is there a likelihood of that happening anytime in the future?
I will be deeply evasive about answering that question.
Thank you, Minister.
The honest answer is I don't think at this time there is any determination in this regard.
Thank you, Minister. What we did to kind of break this conversation in different ways, we wrote to about 30, 40 people from around the world, key technologists, key thinkers on technology. We filtered some of those questions down. I'm going to take three very quickly. The first question from Russell Waruba, who heads digital policy in Papua New Guinea. Russell?
Good morning, Honorable Minister Dr. Shashank. Thank you very much for your support to Papua New Guinea and the Pacific. Sir, my question to you is, we've heard a lot about the Quad and the Pacific. Could you tell us how the Quad could help island states like mine? Thank you, sir.
If I can take three? Would that be okay, sir?
Sure.
The second, Rosa Balfour, Director of Carnegie Europe.
Thank you very much, Rudra. I'm based in Brussels. I'm usually based in Brussels now. I'm in the front row here. And I'd like to ask you, what does Europe misunderstand about India?
Sorry, what does Europe misunderstand about India? And the third question is by Thorsten Brenner, who's the co-founder of GPPI based in Berlin. Thorsten? Yep.
Thank you, Rudra. Dr. Jaishankar, faced with Chairman Xi and President Trump, Europe confronts the dual challenge of de-risking. And I'm just curious what Europeans could learn from the Indian experience of managing dependencies.
So,
These were the easy ones.
these were the easy ones, sir.
Okay. So the Quad and what can it do for Pacific island states? I think we have been trying to do some things. There have been actually achievements on the ground. A lot of things are still in the pipeline. In fact, just yesterday, day before yesterday, we announced Quad STEM fellowships for Pacific nations. So that's one example. But if I were to look at the bigger things we're trying to do, I would say there would be areas where individual Quad countries would be weighing in. There would be more collective, coordinated activities. areas like, say, connectivity to some degree, telecom, responding to natural disasters, early warning systems, even health issues. So there's a fairly broad agenda there. What we've been trying to do on a bilateral level is actually the agenda is not self-fulfilling. We need the partner also to show their interest and move things. Say in the case of Papua New Guinea, for example, we've committed, now this is as India, to a space application center. We would be keen to help in health response systems, or in fact in matters to do with IUU fishing. So what the Quad does is it offers a whole lot of choices on areas which are developmental priorities of Pacific Islands. And it's up to the island really to exercise those choices. But it does certainly strengthen your hand and in many cases give you very tested solutions, on weather forecasting, in issues like, say, dialysis, in 5G based on Open RAN. So that would be my broad answer. On what does Europe misunderstand about India? Look, I'm not sure I would use that word. There are gaps. I mean, I'm not being diplomatic about it. Often we tend to see a degree of judgmentalism based on Europe's own situation. So to the extent Europe, Europe has had the good fortune of having a certain strategic comfort for multiple decades. For a continent which saw so much violence and bloodshed, then you've had really 70, 80 years. Yes, there have been some issues. Yugoslavia was one. What's happening right now in Ukraine is another. But by and large, Europe has enjoyed a period of peace, prosperity, stability, security, and complacency, which came out of it. So now Europe is compelled by global developments to perhaps conceptualize its own interests more sharply and then see how it can secure that optimally. So some of our debates is, a region which is very secure finds it very hard to understand another which is going through very difficult challenges. So whether it is on an issue like terrorism, whether it is even on matters like, territorial, I would say, integrity and sanctity of borders. We have not always had the kind of understanding and support that we expected out of Europe. So I think today the strategic reawakening of Europe has created the basis for much more serious conversations on many more subjects, especially matters relating to security and strategy. Also the economics and I would say the demographics are bringing us together. That when I look, for example, at a country like Germany, when Chancellor Schulz was here in October, a lot of our conversations with him and his team actually revolved around skilled mobility of skilled talent to support German industry and German tech. So there are strong convergences. I think those convergences will grow with the passage of time. And certainly when we speak of a multipolar world, for us it's very important that Europe is a pole and thinks of itself as a pole. So for that reason, I'm actually somewhat optimistic of the turn of events. On the US and China, look, our our experiences are very different. Some of it flows from what I said about Europe, that we've actually seen both extremes. For the first few decades after independence, very sharp contestation between US and China and getting caught in the middle of it. And then even worse, deep collaboration between US and China and being at the wrong end of it. So, neither situation for us. So it's kind of like a Goldilocks problem, So you want ideally a kind of an optimal situation, but they're not going to oblige the rest of the world. I think we are clearly heading for a period of sharp competition and contestation. And different countries need to plan for it. That planning is going to be much harder. It's going to be much harder because in the past we could insulate sectors, saying, this doesn't matter, this is only trade. It's not political, it's not defense, it's not sensitive. I think what is our definition of what is sensitive has expanded. Nothing is only trade anymore. No investments are as purely, nothing is purely business anymore. Everything is also personal. So that world makes it much more complicated really to navigate this, but navigate it we must. I think this is actually going to be the predicament for the world, which is to do a more difficult journey with many more obstacles in a much more challenging kind of topography.
We've got 10 minutes, 3 more questions. So I'm going to ask you to keep it very quick. Carlos Montes, professor at Cambridge University. Carlos?
Yeah, oops. The screen disappeared, so I need to get my...
I think you'll need to be a bit quicker.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for your thoughtful... Thank you so much for your, thoughtful comments. The Prime Minister shared with me his pride in how India leads with technology that puts people first, which is very unusual in the world. And he pointed to UPI as a transformative example. And from your perspective, what are the key steps to ensure that Indian society maximizes this technology's potential, driving prosperity at home and abroad, particularly in these difficult times, and enabling India to fulfill its historic role as Vishwa Guru, a true teacher to the world?
Very quickly, Lisa Curtis, CNAS in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's very enlightening to get your perspective. The transatlantic partnership is being shaken like never before. Do you think China will seek to exploit this increasing divide between the Trump administration and Europe?
And perhaps the best question for the last, one of our young ambassadors from the Kautilya School of Public Policy. Please go ahead. Just go ahead.
Can you hold up the mic closer? Yeah.
There's no need to be nervous. You can just ask the question.
Sir, I want to ask about with emerging technologies now a key determinant of global power. How India will navigate the delicate balance between strategic tech alliances and maintenance of technological sovereignty. Do you also see a role for Indian academia in this process?
Okay, so you got a question on DPI, Transatlantic Alliance, China, and India.
Yeah. Okay. Look, on the, you referred to the UPI, but that's one example, a very important, successful one, but still one example. I would actually make the point that in the last decade, there has been at a societal level an enormous embrace of digital technology in this country. Now, we in fact assume it's happened all over the world. And as a frequent traveler, I have to say that is not exactly the case. You know, when you go around the world, I'm very surprised how much more conservative many other countries and societies and people are about the application of technologies of digital technology, particularly to their daily lives. And, you know, cashless transactions are one very good example. Okay, you know, if you look at our just raw numbers, the numbers are huge. And, okay, the transactions may be small, but to me the important point is if you have a large number of small transactions, that means it is actually seeped all the way down. So, and when we look today, not just at, say, business or even the social side, I look even at governance. A lot of what we have been able to do, we would not be able to do if it wasn't built on a digital backbone. If we are today, let us say, we have a health system which covers about half our population today, it would be inconceivable. You know, we wouldn't know who the beneficiaries, who the eligible people would be. If we have, you know, we built 40 million houses, which means at 5 a house, about 200 million people have got houses. We wouldn't know who are the 40 million people who deserve that house, who are eligible for that house. So what it has done is, it has created, and you know, I mean, there are a lot of other services. I mean, you could say your passport has got easier, your income tax filing has got easier, your driving license has got easier. But pretty much every walk of life, when I see the ease and, you know, the confidence and the agility and the, you know, creativity with which people today are applying this to the daily problems, to the governance, to policy issues, to their transactions, I think it's actually something we should be very proud of. Now, how can it impact the world? To some extent through examples. Because one of the advantages of putting some of this in a global south construct is other nations, there are a lot of nations who believe that if it works in India, it will work for them. They believe that the conditions are similar and therefore these are replicable or transposable experiences. They may not believe it of the same technology or the same experience if it was happening in some other region at a very different level of development. So, you know, there is a, I would say, an exemplar's impact as well. But here again, it's, you know, it doesn't happen by itself. That it needs leadership, it needs policies, it needs constant exhortation, motivation, marketing, call it what you will. It has to be very activist for it to reach that level of penetration and that degree of acceptance. And that, to my mind, you know, going back to your first question, that actually readies the society for a different growth possibility ahead, you know. I mean, it's not just a question of having a different pathway. The mindset and the capability and the instincts of people have to be differently prepared for a different pathway to be exploited. And that, to my mind, is the churning and change in India, which makes this today a possibility. On the transatlantic and would China exploit it? Look, it is a competitive world. It is a multipolar world. Every gap, every opportunity will be used by every player. You know, no player is going to constrain themselves out of respect for, you know, the fine feelings of somebody else. So if something shows up, I think as a general principle, you know, after all, it doesn't have to be China. I mean, tomorrow if two other countries have gaps between them, whether it is Europe or United States, would exploit it equally cheerfully. So, I mean, we have to get real about this world and move out of both the political correctness that, different people should have different standards of behavior and operations in the international polity, as well as a realization that the thinking of countries about their interests have changed. In some ways it had, it was there inside of us, we just didn't say it. In some cases it has genuinely changed. So it's, and I'm not, again, I don't want to give you a kind of a vision of an anarchic Hobbesian world. I think there will be equilibriums. What we are probably going to see, instead of a overarching world order, which is very convenient for anybody in the political science, international relations business, we are actually going to see regional aggregates, regional balances. So there will be a US-Europe balance. There will be a China-US balance. There will be a China-Europe balance. There will be an India balance. So it's these multiple balances which would be more autonomous of each other, whose aggregate and interplay would actually determine what the global order is likely to be. And the last issue on the, the strategic interests and the tech sovereignty. There is a, it's a, there is an interplay there, because, again, if you need to have that tech capability which has aspects of sovereignty built into it, which will make us a player. We cannot, a country of this scale and this size and this history and that ambition, we have to think of ourselves as a player and design our policies accordingly. And to do that, we need to get the alliances and the understandings right in different domains, certainly in the tech domain. So there will be some give and take, because when you work with other countries, sovereignty is always, to some degree, is a card you put on the table in return for some gain. So you work out what is an ideal degree of cost and benefit out there. I think that would apply to the tech world as well. But I think it's very important, therefore, to be judicious, because the nature of the business is so profound. The consequences are so far-reaching. This is not just about trading. You can always not buy from the earlier supplier. That kind of rapid changes and options won't happen in this world. I think it's a far more, I would say, linked world, or a interdependent, interpenetrative world. So, and yes, I certainly, as research, innovation, GCCs, designing pick up in this country, I think Indian academia, which again there is a general feeling that, there should be more resources and greater attention given to R&D and innovation in this country. I think clearly they will have a greater role to play.
Dr. Jaishankar, thank you for your time, generosity, and we look forward over the next 2 days to connecting these linked worlds in different technological ways. Thank you very much and for your support, sir.